Rose for Emily and mention that terms, these are literature terms, elements of short stories, are your friends. What do I mean by that? Because of really what you do oftentimes when you write your argument about a given work of literature, in this case a story, you have as part of your arsenal many terms that you can use. So I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce you to a few of those. Many of them you probably already know about, and I'll link you to elements of short stories as well. But begin thinking about these. We can start with plot, because that's just the sequence of events. In essence, what happens in the story. So as practice, it's a good idea to summarize the plot of a story like A Rose for Emily by Faulkner. What happens? Well, obviously we can work from the ending, and here it is beginning at the ending, and the chronology of the story is quite deliberately artistic and draws you in, but some will say, oh, that's confusing. The video was easier for me to understand. That's not what I want you to write about. I don't want you to write about what I liked and what I didn't like. That's really not the issue, because you're showing the power of your mind and your insights into a story like this. And believe me, yours are unique. So plot is what takes place, and a summary of it is important. We know that it ends with, of course, the death of Emily, the fallen monument, Homer Barron being sort of enshrined, lying in her bed, the corpse of Homer. She held on to it. You know, there are numerous instances of this happening on the part of people who cannot and will not let go. And this seems to be symptomatic of Miss Emily, who, I mean, we can make the case, and you can make the case, certainly, that she was in a sense abused because she was so protected, and of course her father drove off the suitors, and she was so sheltered, as was pretty typical of the Southern Belle, to the point where she's not really allowed. She's so restricted. She's not allowed to pursue, let's say, just a career in pharmacy, although she takes an interest in it, but that's because she wants arsenic. But she's not allowed to do more than, well, you can teach China painting, and you can give piano lessons, but your mind is not necessarily to be cherished, because you're not going to be a doctor. You're not going to, at this point, you're not even going to be a professor. Forget it. Okay, well, so plot is what happens, and you can easily summarize what happens in the story as you piece it together. And it isn't told in a chronological way. As you well know, it shifts back and forth in time. Okay, so what perhaps arises from plot if we really delved into the plot and understood the plot? And that's the literal level, right? That's the what happens level. That's critical. Because without that, we can't really go on, whether it's a play, whether it's a poem, whether it's a story. Where do we go from there if we don't grasp that much? So that takes time. And I want to get this across too, because a story like this is demanding. It's not going to come to your terms. You have to make the concession to appreciate the work of art on its terms. Worth it, very much. Yeah, I used to accompany lots of folks on trips up to museums, various spots like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Invariably, the comment would come out, well, I don't like that painting, or I don't like that work of art because it's modern art. I don't care for that, or I don't do that, and so on. I mean, whatever it is, pick your example. But I'm going to say, wait a minute. It's up to us to do our best to wrap our heads around and appreciate the Faulkner style, which is very involved, involuted, convoluted, rhythmic prose, right? Periodic prose is sometimes called. Sometimes a sentence will go on and on. Well, if you read a book like As I Lay Dying by Faulkner for pages. So this can be a challenge. But that's where we need to open ourselves up to the possibilities of the aesthetic appreciation of the work of art. Maybe, yeah, we read a story by Raymond Carver, right? And Raymond Carver is very sparing in his prose, very clipped and direct, beautiful and powerful. I mean, if you watch Birdman, you can see Raymond Carver showcased, and you're going to be reading The Cathedral by Raymond Carver fairly soon. Well, the style, as does Hemingway's, Faulkner's contemporary, it's going to contrast. Again, I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, you can appreciate both, just as you can appreciate all kinds of different forms of aesthetic pleasure. You can derive that aesthetic pleasure, right? So it's the appreciation or love of what is beautiful. Well, talk about beautiful. Look at this paragraph. Big, squarish frame house that had once been white, decorated with cupolas and spires and scrolled balconies in the heavily lightsome style of the 1870s, set on what had once been our most select street, but garages and cotton gins had encroached and obliterated even the august names of that neighborhood. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and the gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. So there you have really the march of the industrialized world coming in, but this stubborn mansion still projecting, still in evidence, just as Miss Emily in her tradition is still there. And look at this. Look at this word choice. I mean, look at this diction. I mean, if this doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. Cedar bemused cemetery. I mean, that actually sort of starts my pulse rate when I reread this. And this sense of time and timelessness of the past. Battle of Jefferson. Confederate soldiers. And some of the men in the funeral still wearing their Confederate uniforms, as it is still today. A symbol, obviously, that is distasteful to many. But on the other hand, we are talking about preserving a tradition. So now, let's come to theme. And, this is not a neat little determination that we can make. We really have to dig for it. But theme is perhaps a suggested or implied idea or message. It's not stated as it might be in a fable. Aesop will tell you exactly what you might conclude. It's a moral. But if you took that concept and you said, wow, what if what's implied in, let's say, a rich and complex story like this, that is in many ways like a puzzle that we dig into and we become lost within it. It's within it, and it may be suggested by it. But even Faulkner, if we unearthed him, couldn't tell us exactly, or wouldn't tell us exactly what it is. We may derive, perhaps, certain themes from the story. And there are many. There's not just one statement. But you already notice the huge difference between plot, which is a sequence of events, and theme, which is not stated within the story, but may be derived from the story. So there are lots of possible themes, right? There is and when we get to stating theme, what I'm trying to get at is, have you not just pick some stray word or concept and say, well, that's a theme. It is an entire statement. It's difficult, oftentimes, to make that statement. So, it may have to do with decay. It may have to do with refusal to accept progress. It may have to do with carpetbaggers. On a certain level, Homer Barron is like a carpetbagger. He comes to take from the South, right? In many ways, one theme that may arise out of this is actually a kind of paradox, which is a contradiction, but yet somehow true. We say happy, sad. We're happy and sad at the same time. That's paradoxical. Perhaps it's paradoxical in this story that on the one hand, there can be a value for maintaining tradition. And we do this within our families. We do this within our communities to a degree. It has to do with, the old house stubbornly remaining, but it also has to do a lot with cherishing the background, the predecessors. We didn't come to be the way we are on our own. That there's a whole history behind who we are culturally and individually. So this background and this history has to do with the house and with Miss Emily, and it also has to do with, the stubborn refusal to accept progress. She says, look what she says. See Colonel Sardras. And that, of course, is loaded with meaning because even the name suggests the splendor, sartorial splendor. I have no taxes. Point blank. She's not going to put, remember, the address on her house. She's not going to accept any of that. Why? She's refusing to accept the possibility of change. So there is perhaps part of the theme that those who refuse to accept the inevitability of at least some degree of change and progress are condemned to a form of living with decay, with death. On the other hand, there's another side to this, right? There are the carpetbaggers who come in and basically reap their benefits and take from the Old South. We've talked about rape in, metaphorically, the Old South. So this is the way of the Old South. This French word, noblesse oblige. That is, we are obligated to take care of others. So Emily is lapsing into, obviously, insanity, and there is Homer Barron, a Yankee, big, dark, ready man, big voiced, eyes lighter than his face. And of course, he is partly victim and partly exploiter here, isn't he? So we get to this other part of at least a theme of the story, that those who represent rampant progress without regard for the institutions, the ways and the traditions of the past, are equally wrong in a sense, because that is also leading down a path of destruction, and we can see that. So there is this kind of ambiguity which is in the story, built in within the story, where we're just led to wonder what the right position is. We talk about symbol too, and we'll talk more about this, but this story is rich in the potential of symbolism, and the rose itself has symbolic suggestions to it, doesn't it? This story is rich on many, many levels, psychological among them, right? And you can dig into that very deeply, and just the language itself, just the word choice itself, the rhythms of the prose, which are so complex, varied, and incredibly rich, as a mystery story, as a detective story. So we've got plot, we've got setting. Setting, of course, is the time, place, atmosphere of the story. Is that important? Could you write a whole paper about that? I know you're doing it in comparison contrast, but I just want to suggest to you that any of these terms can also fit within the purview of that. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So, Emily, her decay, the ruin, the house, the incredible power of the story. And it's not just a story that is about a kind of gothic event. There are lots and lots of very popular novels made into movies and so on that have a gothic tinge to them. But this has something else. It has the beauty, power of literature, and that wonderful, powerful mystery surrounding it. So we have plot. We have point of view. This point of view of the story. And it's interesting because this story is told from multiple points of view in a way, isn't it? But primarily from the implied point of view of the townspeople. It mentions we very, very often, almost like a Greek chorus, right? So a unique point of view from distance, which makes Miss Emily into a sympathetic character. At the same time, she certainly has her horrifically decayed and demented side to her. So there she is, what she became. A small, fat woman in black, thin gold chain descending to her waist, vanishing into her belt, leaning on an ebony cane. The richness of the description is just actually inspiring in itself. Her eyes, lost in the fatty ridges of her face, look like two small pieces of coal pressed into a lump of dough. And there's what Emily has become, right? What she became. So, again, you think about these terms, you think about how the plot works within the story, you think about how the symbols work, theme as a possibility. And by the way, I've only touched on one indirectly. There are many possibilities for that. There's the diction, there's the style in which the story is written, there's the tone of the story. That is the implied author's attitude to the story. And you know, there's a kind of reverence for, again, Emily, the Grierson family, a kind of respect and reverence, but at the same time there's a recognition that death is involved in this form of decay. And certainly there we are, Miss Emily pulling rank, picking up her arsenic for supposedly for rats. We know what it's for. And you know, to enjoy the story, you can't do it quickly, can you? You have to take your time. Well, you know, maybe you read it 10 times. That's okay. Nothing wrong with you. And then by the 10th time you get it. It's like that with Shakespeare. It's like that with philosophy, one of the courses that I taught for many, many years. Doesn't mean you're not sharp if you have to read something many, many times. So I really want to get that across. Okay, you've got a few terms under your belt. You've got to look at the story. You've got the magnificent language of the story, the style in which the story is written, and lots of other terms that we can bring to bear upon this and other stories. But I'm going to say that's enough for now.